Welcome to the Journal-Star Baseball Hall of Fame podcast. I'm Dave Reynolds from the Journal-Star Sports Department, joined by Kirk Wessler on my left, David Minion on my right. We are going to discuss the upcoming announcement for the Baseball Hall of Fame voting. That will be January 24th, just about 10 days from now, 11 days. So Kirk and I are both voting members for the Hall of Fame, and Dave is the Peoria Chiefs beat writer and an expert on the Cleveland Indians history, of which we have some very qualified candidates this year. And we'll start there with our favorite son, Jim Thome, who is, of course, a 13-year Indian, I think, and 612 home runs. I mean, his accomplishments are many. Looks like a surefire Hall of Famer based on the early voting tabulation. Cleve, we'll start with you. Tell us about Jim Thome's qualifications, and do you think he's in for sure?
I think he's in for sure. I mean, the Hall of Fame should have a guy like Jim Thome. He checked off all the boxes on the field, but he also off the field was a guy of great character and one of the most likable ball players I think anybody ever had the opportunity to work with. So yeah, he's going in. He's going in as an Indian. And I can tell you all kinds of reasons why.
Go for it.
All right. He hit 337 of his home runs with Cleveland, which is still the all-time franchise record for that storied team.
That never wins a World Series.
That just can't win one in my lifetime. And, you know, I was thinking about this because you asked me to come on and talk a little bit about him, some of my Jim Thome memories. I saw, and I saw it online today, it's actually on YouTube. He hit a ball on July 3rd, 1999 in what was then Jacobs Field, 511 feet. And it remains the only home run ever to completely leave the ballpark. It landed on Eagle Avenue behind and beyond center field. And he hit that against Kansas City off somebody named Weigert or Wingert or something. I don't know who the poor guy was.
Somebody that's not going to be in the Hall of Fame.
He's not going to be in the Hall of Fame, but boy, that ball should be. He just blasted that thing. And there's some great video of that call and that home run. He hit so many of his home runs just shaded to the right of center field. It was a typical Jim Thome home run.
He hit a lot to left field too, didn't he?
He had it inside out. Yeah, he really could. And that was the way that ballpark is set up. That's a shorter porch there, so it fit him really well. He was just made for that ballpark and for that team, and it was a great era watching him play.
And Jim obviously played for some other teams too, the Phillies, the White Sox, the Dodgers briefly, and I think he finished with the Twins. I think he hit number 600 with the Twins.
I think so. Well, the Indians did claim him on waivers
had him for a short
time. A stretch run, and he came back. The game he came back, well, I want to say that would be September 23rd, 2011, was his first game back after being claimed on waivers by Cleveland. And there were thousands of fans around the dugout and home plate area holding signs that said welcome, and instead of home it said Thome.
There you go.
Thome.
Nice.
And the game stopped briefly, and he was very emotional. He stepped out of the box, his first at-bat, took his helmet off and waved to everybody. A great moment.
He was, as you mentioned, also a great, and still is, a great humanitarian for the game.
Yeah.
Ambassador. Won the Roberto Clemente Award, which is the ultimate award for a baseball player to receive for those off-the-field achievements. And you talk to any of his teammates for all of his teams, and they discuss, when they talk about the greatest teammates they had, Jim Thome is usually at the top of the list.
Yeah, I mean, he just, guys on this ballot, there are guys on this ballot this year that have been caught up in some things, over the years. And Jim carried himself cleanly through his career, and I don't think there's anybody who knows him that has anything bad to say about the guy.
Yeah, I mean that's not obviously one of the qualifications.
No,
for
no,
Hall of
no,
Fame.
it's
You
not.
can be pretty,
But
in
these are
most
human
cases.
beings
No, I know. I just wanted to
casting
clarify
ballots.
that.
Well,
And-
integrity and sportsmanship are
Are part of it. Yes,
qualifications,
yes, they absolutely are. But that's usually translated as on the field. It's
Sure.
not the behind the scenes stuff. And we've all seen. I mean, we've seen Hall of Famers who treat people like crap behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And Jim Thome was not raised that way, and he's never been that way. And that was, in the years that we've covered him, and all three of us have had, varying opportunities to go cover him at games and when he's come back to the area, and so we all know him and have dealt with him. And the thing that's interesting to me is that particularly as his career got to its later stages, regardless of whether he was with the White Sox or he was with the Twins or finishing up with the Indians, and I went back when they put up the statue of him at Progressive
so cool.
Field, the old
now it's Progressive.
or whatever it's called. It is Progressive now, right, in Cleveland. And talking to people around the ballpark, I mean, it was so cool. Ushers who had been there since the place opened, and he was on the team back in the heyday in the 90s, and they'd all met him, and they were so excited that this statue was going up of this guy who, when he appeared that day, maybe they hadn't seen him in 8 or 9 years, and he's calling by their first name.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
An usher. Or a stadium cleanup crew person or whatever that was around, and that's how he was. He's good with everybody. He's a good person with everybody that he meets, and it doesn't matter whether you're the owner of the franchise or the guy pushing the broom in the clubhouse. He's going to thank you for being there. Thank you, and gee, it's great to see you. And it's not just I do this because it'll help me. Whatever. It's a thing. He naturally, genuinely cares about what you think and how you're feeling.
The other thing too, you wrote a story, and I'm trying to remember. You had gone up to Chicago to see a game, and it had to be near the end of his career. It was either with the White Sox maybe. And I remember you telling me how you were sitting in the dugout before the game with him, and he's probably 40, and he's banging his bat on the dugout floor, excited and saying, I think he said, it's a great day to play baseball.
Yeah.
We're going to play baseball.
Yeah.
And that's just that little boy enthusiasm that he managed to keep throughout that long
I think
career.
in that interview, it was toward the end of his time with the White Sox.
Yeah, okay.
And he was I had asked him what it was that kept him going. He goes, "It's the competition." He says, "I love putting on the uniform. I mean, I love everything about it. I love strapping them up," is the way he put it. It's just strapping them up, strapping it on, getting out there. Just loved the competition. It just got him going. And at that point in time, I mean, he knew he didn't even want to think about the career ending. I mean, he acknowledged that I was getting to be that age, but I still feel I can contribute, and he did for a while yet. Yeah. But it was clearly toward the end of his career. But he never ever lost that enthusiasm for the game and the joy of the competition. Turn your freaking phone off, Reynolds. Good grief.
Siri is trying to weigh in over here.
So it's terrific.
Yeah.
And then, but on the field, I mean, you talked about the 612 home runs. It's what is that eighth, right? Eighth all time. And you got in front of that. I mean, let's if you eliminate the juicers, you're left with Aaron and Mays
and Ruth
and Griffey.
Well,
are the only four in front of him. He's fifth.
Since we're in an analytics age, based on an analytics website that's very popular, they churn all the numbers, do the analysis, and come out with the 10 hitters that are most similar to Jim Thome. And 5 of these guys are in the Hall of Fame: Mickey Mantle, Frank Thomas, Mike Schmidt, Willie McCovey, Ken Griffey, Reggie Jackson. I mean, he's in some pretty storied company there.
Well, he's got a 956 career on base plus slugging percentage.
Yeah, that's unconscious.
Which is sick.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Dave.
I just wanted to move on with the rest of the voting, but just to wrap up the Jim Thome part of it, there are 5 players in Major League history on this list: 500 home runs, 1,500 runs scored, 1,600 RBI, and 1,700 walks. The 5 players are Barry Bonds, Mel Ott, Babe Ruth, Ted Williams, and Jim Thome.
Yeah.
So if he's not in the Hall of Fame after reading that, then something's very wrong.
I got to say, the walks are incredible because he's way up there in all-time strikeouts too.
Yeah.
But, you know, unlike your free swingers, and there's a lot of them out there today because and you know, the analytics of the game says, you know, they don't worry about that swing. Strikeouts don't matter that much. And it's true, and he struck out a lot. But unlike a lot of these guys today, he was selective. He walked a lot, which contributed obviously to that on-base percentage. I mean, a lot. You know, there were some intentional walks in there, obviously, but the guy knew he knew the strike zone. He knew how to get on base, and when you put the ball in the zone, he knew exactly what to do with it and could do it.
Yeah, he was incredible.
And it's always an honor for a guy to get into the Hall of Fame on the first ballot. You know, it's not as rare as sometimes we think. There have been 8 in the last 4 years. But, you know, those guys are usually surefire guys that you know are going to get in and generally get in with a very high percentage on their first try. We've got a couple others this year. Chipper Jones, I think, is going to make it. He made my ballot for sure.
Mine too.
And Omar Vizquel, longtime Indian also. Great shortstop. I think of him as kind of the American League version of Ozzie Smith, only with a little better stats.
Yeah, he was a better, little better offensive player production wise, and every bit Ozzie's defensive equal, if not more. I mean, he would field ground balls barehanded in live game action and throw guys out. I mean, I just never saw that.
The similarities between Vizquel and Smith are striking because neither of them was blessed, particularly for playing shortstop. Neither of them was blessed with a cannon for an arm. They had to do with a more average arm, if you will, particularly among shortstops. But they used that extraordinary athleticism to be able to, you know, it was a quick release, you know what to do with it. And that bare hand thing was part of that. You know, it's like, hey, if it's easier for me and quicker for me to get to the ball and get it on my bare hand on it and get the grip on it and throw it without having to pull it out of the glove, that's the way I'm going to do it. People don't realize a lot of times these things that they see these players do, they're not hot dogging. And they're not, I mean, not to say that there's not an occasional, I think I'm going to, do something just to get people excited. But a lot of it, it's not hot dogging. It's not, hey, I'm going to do something that I think people will really like and it's cool. It's born out of a necessity. And it's like, okay, how can I maximize what I've got here and how can I make this play happen or how can I use what I have to do this play most efficiently? And if that means I'm going to grab the ball barehanded on this kind of a play, and don't think they don't work on that stuff.
Oh,
you go out to a ballpark at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, long before the gates open to the general public, and guys at this level, they're out there drilling. And it's over and over and over and over and over. And that's why when they do it in a game, this is not necessarily new to them.
He would do it though he would range toward the hole and do it with a sharp hop ground ball. I mean, barehanded.
Yeah.
The hand to eye to do that kind of thing is just inconceivable to me. I can't imagine how he did that.
You don't think Vizquel's going to make it first ballot though?
I have my doubts.
I don't think that'll happen.
I don't
first
think he
ballot
will.
either.
I voted for him. I think you did
I voted
too.
for him too. Yeah.
I think he'll get strong support, but there are so many good holdovers that were close last year.
Well, that brings up a question about the ballot in general, and we talked about this before we started up. And the people watching and listening to this aren't ever going to see a ballot. What is on the ballot? How do you get it? How do you qualify to be a voter? What's the process?
Well, first you have to join the Baseball Writers Association of America. Kirk and I are both
and that's
members.
not as easy as it sounds.
No, I went through Chicago in the 90s and I was denied. The Peoria Journal-Star was not high enough on the Chicago chapter's list. So went to St. Louis, and they accepted us with open arms. They needed members, a smaller market, and I started voting. That was in 1990 when I joined the St. Louis chapter. Had to cover baseball for 10 years in order to become a qualifying Hall of Fame voter. So I became a voter in the year 2000, so this is my 19th year of voting. Yeah. And Kirk joined up a little later, I believe.
A little bit later, and but through the St. Louis chapter, and this is my second year of voting, but 10 years after getting vetted and making sure that.
So how's the ballot come to you? Email?
It comes no
old-fashioned
snail mail.
This is the old-fashioned way, man.
It comes in the mail.
In the mail, and you have to mail it back.
Wow.
Yep.
There is no such thing as an electronic ballot, and it's got to be checklisted. You put a little check in the box,
all paper,
and you got to sign your name, and you got to write down your honor, your number.
Wow.
And you can vote for the list. I've got one in front of me here. This year's ballot has 33 eligible candidates. In order to be eligible, a player has to be a major leaguer for 10 years, and that's really the only qualification.
And then they have to be retired for 5.
And retired for 5.
And how many do you vote for?
You can vote for up to 10.
Up to 10.
You can vote for 0. You can vote for 10.
Or any number between.
Or any number in between. Yep. I voted for 10. I think it's a strong ballot. I think there's a lot of qualified candidates there. I mean, I'll run through my guys.
Take it through who you voted. I'm curious how we.
Yeah, I voted for Vladimir Guerrero.
Yeah.
He almost made it last year. Trevor Hoffman, National League all-time save leader. Chipper Jones, I mentioned earlier. I voted for Jeff Kent, all-time home run leader for second baseman. And following up with Edgar Martinez, the great hitter for the Seattle Mariners for years. Mike Mussina, one of the top pitchers in the 90s for both the Yankees and the Orioles. Kurt Schilling, numbers similar to Mussina, a little better in some areas, not so good in others. Mentioned Jim Thome and Omar Vizquel, and the last guy I voted for on the ballot was Larry Walker, who hasn't had good support in his first few years, but apparently he's getting better this year. His numbers are off the charts if you really study what he's done.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Kirk. What's yours?
We voted for 9 of the same people. The one we differed on, I did not vote for Kent. I voted for Scott Rowland, and that was one I went back. I wasn't really considering Kent. It was basically I had one spot open, and I don't have any problem leaving one open, but I was kind of, and I went back and over the numbers, and the more I looked at Rowland, and the more I looked, I think this guy was a little underappreciated.
Yeah. Great fielder.
Oh, great! 8 Gold Gloves. His numbers in comparison to other third basemen in the Hall of Fame are very comparable. I mean, Mike Schmidt blows all other third basemen away. But after that, you've got a group in there, and he's solidly in that next group of, 10 or 12, and I think there's only 13. Is that right? 13 third basemen in the Hall of Fame, and he's better than 3 or 4 of them that are in there, and he's right with or right on the tail of some others that you think of in terms of like Wade Boggs and Brooks Robinson and people like that. So I mean, I find that was what convinced me. I think I'll vote, put my 10th vote down for Rowland. You mentioned Kurt Schilling, if I can.
Yeah.
Here was the thing. I had my questions, and I voted for Schilling last year as well. And I had some questions going into that, and I looked at it and go, "Boy, those are really good career numbers." But I thought, does that rise to it? Here was the difference maker for me. That man was a postseason beast. He was 11-2 as a pitcher, as a starting pitcher in the postseason. Across the board, his stats in the postseason were better than the regular season. Whether it, the winning percentage, his ERA went down, plunged under. He hit about a 3.3 ERA, I think, as an all-time, which is pretty damn good anyway. But he was under 3. I'd have to look this up here. I've got it written down if I can find it. Oh, yeah, 2.23. So he's a full run per game less.
Against the best teams.
Against the best teams in the most high-pressure situations. His whip walks and hits to innings pitched is under 1 in the postseason. It wasn't during the regular season, but it's under 1 in the postseason. And his strikeout to walk ratio, which was always good, he was like 4.3 during his career, was like 4.8 in the postseason. This guy, you talk about somebody that you would want pitching a big game in the postseason, he'd have to be one of those handful of pitchers at the top of anybody's list. And I think that's a difference. He was an outstanding pitcher already, but I think that's the difference maker. And I can't let this go without saying this, and you guys can say what you want. I was appalled last year when his vote support went down, clearly because of some of the things that he's said.
Because of his politics.
But it's politics, and I'm sorry,
and that's
right. BS.
Yeah.
That's BS. With all due respect to any voters out there that I can't vote for him because he says this or that, or he thinks this or that. Hey, we are not the thought police, damn it.
Yeah, they don't. Cooperstown doesn't have a Republican and Democrat wing. They just have
good
ball players.
I mean, it's unfortunate in the time period in which we live, and I understand that. I'm not on board with everything the man says either, but
he's a ball player in this context.
Yeah. I mean, because what you do when you do this, okay, and just to step outside baseball, move to the football side, if you just let's just say Colin Kaepernick was a baseball player and a pitcher, and you had all the stats and the background and the history that Schilling had, and the conservatives, if you will, on the Baseball Hall of Fame committee look at that, and they're PO'd because he's taking a knee. Or let's just say it was Curt Schilling, and Curt Schilling was taking knees these days during the national anthem. Do you think that they would be pulling votes away from him? No, hell no they wouldn't, and they shouldn't. But it's exactly the same kind of a thing. Exactly.
On the other side of the coin, neither of you voted for Bonds, Sosa, Clemens. How come?
Well,
STEROI.
Yeah, I think we kind of had to make a stand early on in that, one way or the other. And some guys have flipped, and they have their reasons. I don't know. To me, if you cheated, you not only cheated the game, you cheated the guys you're playing against. You created an uneven playing field by
the greatest baseball is such a great sport because of its records, its history, and it's tainted by these guys.
714 really used to mean something.
Yeah.
I mean, 762. I mean, I know 762, but most fans don't.
Put an asterisk on that. I'm sorry. I mean, it's tainted, and it's. I just hope they don't ever relent in that position. Yeah. Don't let them in.
I will never say never, because.
Well, where's Theobald right now? Isn't this the time of year where we start crying for Pete Rose and shoeless Joe Jackson?
You're not getting me cry. I'm not crying for Pete Rose. I'm not crying.
That was a slug of a human being right there.
Well, and the rules as that pertain to it was on and still is on. It's posted in every clubhouse.
Yeah.
What will get you kicked out of baseball for life.
Right.
And he walked right by that sign every day and did it anyway.
Right.
Well, dude, sorry. Now, if whatever, I would not have had a problem. It was interesting because Bart Giamatti, when he banned him, also left the door open. Tad, not that Giamatti. It would have been interesting to see if Giamatti had lived another 15, 20 years and stayed in the office. How that might have played out. I don't know. There's a lot of other factors involved with that. And again, I would never say never, but there's a lot of other things, and that's probably a discussion for another day. But these guys, as I look at it now, and I know Dave mentioned some of the other writers have changed. Well, they've always been, it doesn't matter. And then there's been some who used to be on, I'm not voting for them, and for various reasons, they've changed their mind. One of the arguments is, because baseball didn't have hard set rules against it, and C-League and the owners, weren't putting their foot down when they had to know what was going on, and they were trying to, recover from the work stoppage in '94, and so they were willing to look the other way. All that stuff's true, but that still doesn't change the fact that these guys did it.
Yeah,
and if
it's a
you want
personal choice,
and it affected the competition on the field. Okay, that's a different thing than off doing something in your personal life. I mean, this affected the competition and the product that we saw and that was taking place on the field. And there are really good bioethical arguments within this that would be fun to explore sometime. But I just, at this point in time, I can't justify votes for people who wantonly, openly cheated the game.
Well, and there's the argument that some writers have put forth that, Bud Selig was elected last year to the Hall of Fame.
And he shouldn't have been.
And he oversaw all of this.
Yeah, but we don't have a vote in Bud Selig. That's a different committee.
But people have used that election to justify voting for Bonds Clemens et al.
Yeah, well, and that's like, you might as well say,
it'd be interesting
somebody,
to see
somebody gets away with murder, so it makes it okay for the rest of us to murder somebody.
I want to see when the tallies come out officially, whether support increased.
Oh, I'm sure it'll
increase.
Definitely
increased.
It's going up. It's going to go up again.
So, they're both over 50%.
And I wouldn't. It'll be interesting. It wouldn't shock me.
How long do they? How do they drop off the ballot?
10 years.
10 years, and they're in their 6th year.
Yeah. So they got. This is the 6th, right? So they got 4 more.
4 more
It's
shots.
going to be really interesting to see if they climb, particularly Bonds and Clemens, because those are two guys whose numbers are just clearly without. There's no arguing at all whether those are Hall of Fame numbers. Those guys, they put up Hall of Fame careers, unquestionably. But there's this monster but. So the question is, how many people among the voters are going to grudgingly not grudgingly, however, how many of them are going to come around to vote for him, and how many of them are going to dig in and say never?
I wonder how much turnover there is in the voter base from year to year. I mean, is there a younger guard that didn't see as many of these guys play coming up? That's where that's how they get in.
Yeah, the Hall of Fame made some voting requirement changes about 3 years ago, phasing out guys who don't regularly cover baseball anymore. Yeah, and that obviously moved the younger guys into making their vote count more, because we basically went earlier. I think there were up to 700 people that voted. Now last year was 422.
Yeah.
So just when you're talking about percentages that are getting a guy in,
that don't need the numbers.
Those younger guys are more forgiving.
And you probably out of the people that were weeded out, they're some of them were retirees, guys that had been, but they had, because they'd been voting as long as they kept up their membership, they were allowed to keep voting until they were 125 years old, if they whatever, and that's not the case anymore. So you take that group out, and that group, honestly, is more likely to have been entrenched against those guys, and the younger ones are coming up, and there's a different, a lot of them, not all of them, but some of them have a different view on this whole issue, and as well as
I would just like to be at a table with somebody who someday does not vote for Schilling and votes for Bonds or Clemens, and have that discussion about how they arrived at that.
Well, and there's also this. What about if a current Hall of Famer comes out and says publicly, yeah, I did steroids? How would that change a voter's mind? Okay, this guy's in, and why are we keeping Bonds and Clemens out? They were clearly better players than the guy who said that.
Well,
I mean, that may change
one
some
doesn't
minds.
just no.
I'll cross that
would.
bridge when Bonds and Clemens finally say, yeah, I did steroids. Bonds, at least, is still in denial. I mean, his head went up like a balloon on those things.
Yeah, well, the thing is, though, on that argument, and there will be people to make that argument, and that's fine. I mean, I guess, but again, that's one of those things that's like, okay, this was done just because that happened. Does not justify, just because one crime was committed or one thing happened or there was an oversight that happened doesn't justify. Well, that opens the door to everything else.
You vote and you act based on the information you have at the time.
Right.
Agreed.
That's all you can do.
You can't go back in time and redo that. But
that's one of our problems, I think, societally today, is that pretty much every time you turn around, it's like we're trying to put things in a context of, something that happened 10 years ago, 30 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, in the context of 2018. And you can't do that. I mean, you can do that and say, wow, what we know today, given all these things, this is abhorrent. Yes, it was. But look at the context of the times, the knowledge that was there, whatever the issue it might be. And it doesn't mean it was right in the bigger scheme of things. But you can't take historical events out of context.
Agreed.
Yep.
So where do you think Jim Thome will be on the day this ballot's announced?
Well, I hope he's in Peoria. I mean,
it would be kind of cool to hang out with him and see his reaction.
I know his dad, Chuck, has lived for this day.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember him asking me a few years ago, okay, what year is it Jim will be eligible? I mean, I hope I can hold on that long. And,
they have a hunting lodge somewhere out here in the boonies.
You've not been invited?
I don't shoot at stuff unless it's shooting back at me. But they had named the lodge. They had hung a sign on it that said Cooperstown South or something like that. And just interesting stuff. I would want to see what's in his trophy room at home. Yeah. I mean, I think there's all kinds of interesting color that we're going to have an opportunity here to see from Jim.
To explore.
Also,
yes, sir.
And I don't want to cause any trouble here, Mayor Artis, but what was it, 5 years ago? We were working on that number 600 piece or whatever it was. I remember one of the stories I did, I asked Jim if he gets in the Hall of Fame, will you do a statue here in Peoria? And he said yes. So,
Mayor Artis said yes.
Yeah. He said, well,
I think he needs a vote on that. I don't think he'd have a problem getting a vote. He might find a problem getting the money.
Yeah, let's get that statue going.
On the other hand,
where would we put it?
If that's a problem, I think we could dig up the private donations to put it up.
I think that could get done overnight, guys.
I don't think there'd be much problem. Where would you put it? That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Where would you put it?
Yeah. Maybe in the Fulton Plaza there across from the arena downtown. I don't know.
On the riverfront?
Not a bad idea.
It would need to be in a high traffic place where people who come to town
can see it and
visit, can see it and would even accidentally run across it.
Museum out on their various plaza-like levels there.
Something. That would be an interesting discussion.
Yeah.
Where to put it.
Well, before we get too far ahead of ourselves,
okay, Dave. Sorry,
Jim has to make it, and
he's in.
We think he's a lock, but we'll know in 11 days what the
When is the induction ceremony? By the way,
it's the last weekend in July. Whatever the last Sunday in July is, that's what it is.
Very good.
And that just about wraps things up for here. I know we covered a lot of ground. Any other Hall of Fame thoughts you guys want to throw out there at this point? We talked about some of the first ballot guys. There's a lot of very good players. I mean, we haven't mentioned Johan Santana. Johan Santana, very, very good pitcher in his day. Andrew Jones is a great outfielder. Johnny Damon, not Hall of Fame caliber, but a nice, like you said, this is not the Hall of the very good. Carlos Zambrano, Cub fans will remember, is eligible for the first time. So,
who's the most obscure name on this list this year?
Kevin Millwood, maybe.
Millwood and Lidge.
Yeah.
Brad Lidge.
Lidge had a couple of really outstanding years with the Astros.
He was fine until Albert Pujols took him,
Yep.
Yeah, wrecked him.
hit it over the train in Houston, and then suddenly he wasn't untouchable.
Aubrey Huff, not exactly a household name, but Matsui, Levon Hernandez, Jamie Moyer pitched forever. He's maybe gets a little support. So and Kirk
I
mentioned
think he's
Scott
still
Rowland.
pitching, isn't he?
Probably
he's only
somewhere.
50.
He might be.
He might
He
still
actually
be
might
pitching
in an
somewhere.
independent league
We
someplace.
better check, see if he's really supposed to be on there.
Yeah. But
Well, that wraps up our Hall of Fame podcast for today. Our thanks to Kirk Wessler and Dave Minion from our Journal Star staff. I'm Dave Reynolds signing off. So long for now.